thousands, in the millions, and we will be. Because it starts right here.
Guilty.
Welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a weekly podcast of the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Danny Abdullah, and as always, I'm here with my comrade and co-host,
Derek Ford.
We're here to guide you through the pressing issues facing Indianapolis from the perspective of the people, not the oppressors. And as organizers involved in these issues, we're not just talking about the news, we're making it happen. Today on Naptown People's Radio, we're going to hear from Robert Taylor, the brother of Eric Taylor. So we talked very, very briefly about Eric Taylor on episode 1. Taylor was killed by IMPD in November of 2023. So he was unfortunately and tragically a part of that killing spree of IMPD back in 2023. After the cops harassed him and followed him home after an argument with the mother of his children, they screamed at him to drop his gun, of which, shocker, he didn't have in his hand. He had his phone in his hand. And when he did not comply, because, again, there was no gun, they then shot him in the head while his teenage daughter was on the phone with him. However, this interview with Robert does not delve into this horrific trauma that has happened to his family, but in fact gives us a glimpse into the person that Eric was, which was a brother, a son, a father. But before we get into that, let's get into our Naptown breakdown. So what you got for us this week, Derek?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the first, obviously, we have to talk about the controversy and the struggle against the impending data center that's going to be imposed on the south side of Indianapolis. So House Enrolled Act 1007, which was signed into law by Governor Mike Braun in May, requires large load customers like a data center to incur 80% of costs for energy infrastructure upgrades. So that means that they have to pay for 80% of all costs, like they would go into increasing our energy infrastructure or power output, right? For example, like AES. Mm-hmm. So that means that 20% would fall to the company, more accurately. AES has requested a rate review by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission to increase rates by 13.5% per resident, citing inflation, sustainability, and strengthening the grid, which is interesting because my paycheck wasn't increased by 13.5% last year, regardless of inflation, sustainability, and my participation in the grid. But the utility company, which has a monopoly on electricity in Marion County, also announced plans to add a new fossil fuel generator at the cost of $4.4 billion each to two facilities, one in Franklin Township. And the rate review hasn't gone before the board yet, and even though the law requires utility companies to present plans on future usage, AES Indiana has not announced a schedule for public meetings. So AES, the worldwide parent company, has been outspoken and expressed its exclusive support for the construction of data centers. There is currently a case study on their website explaining how Google's data centers are combating climate pollution by partnering with AES to create, quote, a holistic energy management solution that enables Google to not only meet the ambitious sustainability goals, but accelerate the widespread adoption of clean energy on a global scale, end quote. Basically, sounds like ChatGPT wrote that. But most importantly, I think it's the fact that these entities operate as complete monopolies, really. They are not public utilities. They should be public utilities. I mean, I can't start an energy company. You can't start an energy company. They are monopolies. They have little to no oversight. Really, any public input that we give, it's almost like it's for show, right? It's not really owned by the people. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a right to electricity, because these are these billionaires are the ones who determine if we're freezing or sweltering in our homes, if we have energy to cook, food for ourselves, our kids, our loved ones, to sustain ourselves so we can go to work the next day without that 13.5% rate, increase in our wage. And that's really the crux of the issue here. And of course, we only learned it was a Google data center because one of the developers let it slip out at a meeting. So at least now we know who our enemy is. And speaking of entities that operate with little to no oversight, none is perhaps more autonomous and self-governing and almost seemingly untouchable than the Indiana Department of Corrections. On Monday, July 14th at noon, we had a press conference here hosted by the Coalition to Free Vernon T. Bateman. And it was a very powerful and important press conference. We had the Indy Star here. We had members of his family here. And of course, some lawyers and supporters to talk about Vernon's case in 1998 that sent him away to prison until 2023, and which he is still under the state's control for, even though there's absolutely no proof and no evidence tying him to the scene. So at the press conference, we learned some things like, basically, just to give you a rundown of the facts of the case, in 1998, in like January or so, February, a woman named Angela Truitt got in an argument with her boyfriend and left his house at 3:30 a.m. She returned 3 hours later at 6:30 a.m., claiming that she had been raped by 3 men. And she called the Gary Police Department and was accompanied by Detective Mary Banks to the Methodist Hospital in the area. There, as a nurse testified at the trial, a sexual assault kit was performed that included, DNA swabs. And then it wasn't until several weeks later that Bateman was identified as one of the suspects. And he was identified because because Banks, Detective Banks, went to Truitt's, the alleged victim's house with a photo book, a photo lineup, and apparently that's where she identified Bateman. Now, during the trial, we have testimony that a sexual assault kit was performed, that DNA was taken. We have Detective Mary Banks saying that it was released to her custody. However, the sexual assault kit was never entered into evidence at trial, and it has still not been considered as evidence. They claim that it is lost. But I think it's probably destroyed by this point. Nonetheless, the court case was supposed to start September 14th, but Truitt didn't show up. Supposed to start again September 15th. Truitt didn't show up. Bateman's lawyer, public defender, didn't file or challenge the objection for the state's motion of continuance, which is, sort of like law school 101. And so when the trial finally started, the injustices proceeded, right? Nobody even asked Vernon for his alibi, and he had an alibi. He was sleeping at his home, but nobody asked his mother that. There was no direct eyewitness testimony delivered against Bateman. The co-defendant in the case, Saran Foley, didn't testify. Instead, Detective Banks read his testimony, implicating Bateman in the crime, depriving Bateman of the right to cross-examination, right? And these are just some of the issues. And so at 18 years old, when his partner has their child in the womb, he's sentenced to 30 years in prison. And he isn't released until 2023, and still any day he could go back on the slightest of the violations of his really unconstitutional, severely restrictive, and targeted parole stipulations. He filed several challenges later on because in 2003 and 2004, Truitt, the alleged victim, recanted 3 separate times. She wrote a letter to Bernard Carter, the Lake County prosecutor, saying that Detective Banks pointed out Bateman and said that's him, and that she had never before seen Bateman. She gave a taped deposition to an attorney, and in 2004, she gave a sworn deposition in court, reversing her, basically recanting, right, her eyewitness identification. So that would be new evidence, right? So when Bateman goes to file an appeal in 2008, you'd think he had pretty good grounds to stand on. Also, in 2007, Chris Veal, the sister or the brother of the alleged victim, Angela, wrote a letter saying that his sister, Angela, was recently diagnosed with a form of bipolar disorder, and that in June of 2007, she went missing for several days, and she showed up, and she said she claimed to have been kidnapped and beaten and raped by a couple, a story similar to the one she told police in 1998. And so when Vernon went before the court in 2008 for the appeal, Truitt took the stand. She was in a psychiatric ward and heavily medicated at the time. And she reversed her recantation and said that Bateman's sister paid her $100 to do it because she had a drug problem. Now, I don't know, you don't have to know too many drug users to know that $100 to do something once, maybe, but not 3 times over 2 years. I mean, this is unbelievable. But nonetheless, the court found her testimony in 1998 and 2008, quote unquote, reasonably believable. But the testimony that she delivered, the recantation, was unbelievable, apparently. But that's not it, because Saron Foley also recanted his testimony several times and pleaded for Bateman's release. He wrote a letter. A public letter, an open letter, a notarized letter. He wrote a letter to Angela Gannot of Fox 59 News. And he also dedicated an entire parole hearing, one of his own, to Bateman. And he said, I know this is about me, but I'm here because I've helped keep an innocent man in prison for 20 years, and he needs to be free. That really says it all, because it's not like you get those every other day or when you request them. That's quite a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So again, we have an instance in which there's no DNA evidence, there's no physical evidence tying him to the scene. That's not all. So in 2017, Bateman files motions for DNA collection and a subpoena Deuce Tuckham to force the state to produce the DNA results of the sexual assault or rape kit collected. The state denied the first motion because, quote, attorney Tavitas's recollection of the trial testimony was that the perpetrators used a condom. Due to that reason, no DNA testing was performed, end quote. That was it. They didn't actually go to the records because the actual testimony was not that. Their denial was based purely on this attorney's recollection of trial testimony in 1998, and this is 2017. The state denied the second motion, claiming, quote, neither the Gary Police Department nor the Indiana State Police can locate any evidence that a rape kit was taken in the investigation of this case, end quote. And again, in 1998, we have a nurse from the hospital testifying that it was performed, the DNA was collected, and we have the actual assault kit that Dr. Winston performed, clearly indicating that it was taken. And so these are, again, based completely on lies. And Bateman wasn't released at this point in time. And he, again, is still not free. And so we had this press conference because this story has amazingly not been making headlines, not only in Indianapolis, but, across the country. Although his work has traveled across the country and the amazing gifts he's given to the community have traveled across the world, actually. So it was very important. And, we really encourage our listeners to go to freevernon.org, the Coalition to Free Vernon T. Bateman, a member organization of the Indianapolis Liberation Center. And we're going to be playing a clip here shortly from that press conference.
Last week, we gave the Circle City shout out to Vernon, who is one of the most amazing human beings that I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm going to try real hard not to go off on a tangent. So Derek is here to help me not go off on a tangent. That's actually the last
because
person.
I know all about going off on tangents. That's why.
I was like, but sometimes when I think about Vernon, I think about, of course, I think about like the fear I have as a mother and a guardian to 2 Black boys, right? And just how like historically this has happened to Black men. But it's not like it only happens to Black men. this happens to, and don't get me wrong, I love women in a gay way and a not gay way, but this happens to men way, way too frequently, which is an injustice, obviously, to the men, but it's an injustice to the women who actually have been assaulted and deserve to have justice, right? But I think about that piece of Vernon's art has gone across the world, right? People have seen Vernon's art in multiple countries at this point, and yet he is still not free. And I don't know if you've ever seen Roots. I feel like this is like maybe the second or third time I've talked about Roots, but Kunta Kinte, he comes and he's stolen, and they set him up with Fiddler. And Fiddler is an older enslaved black man, an enslaved African who doesn't have to work in the fields, has all of these privileges, quote unquote privileges, right? Because he has this beautiful talent of playing the violin. And he gets to go to different houses and play the violin, and he gets to just kind of hang out and do whatever most of the day because he plays the violin. He has this amazing talent. And yet Fiddler is enslaved just like Kunta Kinte. And it doesn't matter that Fiddler has this gift, right? It didn't matter that he had this gift. He is still, at the end of the day, enslaved, just like everyone else on the plantation. And they remind him of that at every turn that they get, that like, you are just another N-word. It doesn't matter that you have this beautiful gift. And I think about Vernon, and I think about Vernon has always had this amazing gift. We talked about that last time, of like art that his grandfather gave him. And yet the system refuses to let him be free, refuses to let him just be an artist and be a dad and be the amazing human being that he is. And I don't know if I really have anything like profound to say. I just think about how the system continues to give us an inch, and then when we take that inch and we're like, oh, maybe I can get more, maybe I deserve more, and he does deserve more, and then it continues to knock him down. And I don't know how much, I'm assuming not a lot, we can get into the things that have happened to Vernon, because I think a lot of things are still in motion. But like, when everything finally comes out and when Vernon is free, I can't wait for Vernon to just tell his story, because every time I hear something else that has happened to Vernon, I'm like, what? How does this continue to happen to him? How does the system continue to brutalize this man who has done nothing wrong?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And with that, let's listen to a clip from Vernon's mother, Donna, speaking at the press conference.
I don't know. I need to talk to somebody. I need to, somebody tell me who to talk to that my son can be cleared for something that don't make sense. If you can just tell me how it made sense to you, then I still don't understand. I need help. Not only do Vernon need help, but I need help to understand what I need to do. Because we've been going through this for years. Since what, 93? 98? And y'all, come on now. This is 2005. Come on. Somebody got to do something. Help us some kind of way. If anybody can tell me something, please tell me. Somebody.
So that was Donna Franklin, Vernon T. Bateman's mother, speaking at the press conference. And, she needs help. And I think we all need help finding answers. I don't think that there are answers that will satisfy us. I think that if this case makes sense to you, I think that there's a serious problem with you, because none of it makes any sense. And the interesting thing, Danny, is it's similar to the Root scenario, although it's almost as if Vernon's being targeted because of his gifts and because of his heart. Because of his generosity and its desire to just like do good. This is a man that just wants to do good. And even in prison, he was doing that, right? And I can tell you some of the more disgusting things that happen to him on a regular basis, because it's not, obviously, the 26 years imprisoned, most of which were in solitary confinement. It sounds as if that was bad enough. But now that he's free, he's still, he was always free in prison in the sense that he was, liberated through knowledge, right? Learning to read and write, producing works of art, children's books, etc. But, I went to his house one day because last summer he got Bell's palsy as a result of the stress induced by the, parole popping up. Every time he goes into the parole office, he doesn't know if he's going to make it out or not, right? So, remember he was in the center. We were like, one of our comrades, the nurse, was like, you should go to the hospital. I think you have Bell's palsy.
Yeah. Yep,
and he did. That. And the police, the PO was supposed to pop up the next day. And so I spent the night at his house so that he could get some sleep, because that's the main thing he needed. And, I brought over some DVDs for him. And one of them was the original Jurassic Park. As one of my students called it, the old-timey Jurassic Park. I know.
Okay.
And he the first thing he says to me is like, "Is this a kids movie?" Because the parole officers would take that and they could violate him and say he's using that to lure kids into his apartment, even though his alleged crime, had nothing to do with a minor, right? Angela Truitt was over 18 years, yet these restrictions are put on him. They're unconstitutional. That's why we say they are unconstitutional. And his PlayStation was taken away from him because he could use that to lure children. They will use any excuse they can. They force him to take polygraph tests and to pay for them, $800, right? Where he's asked questions like, do you fantasize about animals? Do you fantasize about wearing dresses? The parole officers will ask, when do you masturbate? How often what do you masturbate to? Very just, inhumane questions, right? And he has to keep that's why he wore a mask for part of the press conference. He's like, I got to mask my emotions, because he can't say I love you to anybody outside of his family without running it by his parole officer first. So even sometimes he'll be like, love, bro, at the end of a conversation. That could be a parole violation. He can't kiss a woman without the prior approval from his parole officer. And he's been denied, actually, this Sunday, July 20th, he was invited to Chicago for the Exoneration Project. They're having a picnic, and his parole officer denied him and his chaperone, myself, and another comrade, the ability to go because it's in a park. So they're preventing him from seeing his lawyers, and they just have complete control. The only way to change his parole stipulations is to write a letter to his parole agent, who will then write a letter to his supervisor, and just on and up, right? And ultimately, the board has ultimate authority over it, except for the governor. So talk about a institution that is meant to keep our people oppressed and that has no transparency, no accountability, and definitely needs to be abolished. And talk about a human being who definitely needs to be free, because our world continues to benefit from his grace, and I benefited as a friend of his from his humility and the model he sets for me as for what it means to be like just a kind, caring human being in the world. He has no political agenda for himself, and he's he wants to be free, but the first thing he wants to do is make a Vernon Bateman law so it never happens to anybody else, and that's why we all need to do everything we can. Go to freevernon.org, sign the petition. Every signature matters, because this is a summer that we exonerate Vernon T. Bateman.
I was about to go to church, but I'm not going to do that to y'all. Okay. All right, y'all. So that was the Naptown Breakdown. We will be right back, where we'll be hearing from Robert Taylor, and about his brother, Eric Taylor. See you then.
The Liberation Center store is a one-stop shop for organizers and activists in today's struggles. We have professionally designed and packaged posters, as well as buttons, stickers, t-shirts, and a host of literature, including books, pamphlets, and more. This month, we are offering deep discounts on posters, buttons, and t-shirts. So cop yourself, a loved one, or a friend one of our Huey P. Newton or Marsha P. Johnson t-shirts. Support the struggle against IMPD terror with our Justice for Adam Sykes and Eric Taylor buttons. And show your solidarity with our brothers and sisters across the globe fighting the same forces that we are with our wide selection of prints. Now going for 3 prints for only $30. Check out a full catalog at IndieLiberationCenter.org/store.
Welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. This is Derek Ford, and I'm here with Robert Taylor, the brother of Eric Taylor, who was killed by the IMPD in 2023. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert.
Thank you for having me here.
So the mainstream media, when they covered Eric's murder, we never really learned about Eric as a human being. It was always in relation to his murder, and it was about the specific facts of the case and what the police alleged, etc. So I was wondering if you could tell our listeners about who Eric really was as a human being and what it was like, growing up with him as a younger brother.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, that's my brother. That's the third boy that my mama had. He would be what you would say the middle child besides the other brother that we had. 6 so But anyway, Eric was full of life. Eric was joyful. Eric had style, charisma. He was smart. A historian. A guy who knew about his laws and what he would do. He would sit down and have a whole conversation with you, and you would be like, "Wow, like I did not know that this guy that looks like this have so much information." Mm-hmm. And he was just a great dude to be around. Pretty much. Eric was a great dude to me. I look up to him as a big brother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And growing up, is there anything in particular that you guys would do together, or rituals you had, or?
Well, we came up, my mom's and our dad, they used to go out and work, and I would watch them all the time. And Eric used to be glued onto the video game. And he used to be on the video games that wouldn't a regular person play, like Zelda. No, you're not going to have me there playing that no longer than 5 minutes. I don't have the mind span to play that long.
Yeah,
but he would get on there and master it, and I'd be like, man, I didn't even know you could play like that on Zelda. Yeah. So
he's a smart dude.
Very smart.
Yeah. And you said he was a historian? He was interested in history?
He loved history. He would talk to you about the Bible, other things, Book of Enoch, just life itself. And when he wasn't talking about that, he would talk to you about the way that the laws are manipulated. He knew a whole bunch,
Yeah, because I remember we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned that he definitely knew his rights.
Yes.
Right?
He knew his rights because he would. He had a few situations when the police came to his house, due by force of the maintenance trying to open his door up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and he would have probably some youngsters there, and different ethnicity, but Eric was open arm. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? He kept his arms open for anybody who would come around him. So on that scenario, he knew his rights so much that the police had their foot in the door, which he had his other foot on the other side of the door, and he would talk them down to get them away from there because, he knew all the things that was right to say, and he knew how to not let them violate his rights.
Right. Yeah, and that's important because I mean, even you might not think it's okay. So what's the harm in the police seeing a little crack in my door? But they can just make up whatever they want and say, oh, you know what, that electrical wiring that looks like it's out of code, and all of a sudden, they say that's grounds for entrance, and then boom, like so that's sharp. Like not a lot of people recognize that. Something that minor, seemingly minor. It's not just don't swing your door open and let them in. It's like don't let them see anything inside of there. And I imagine that, I don't know if that got him a reputation amongst the police, but the police probably didn't like that.
Well, yeah, they didn't because it was like he was targeted, He'd be in situations where, just randomly the police would come and mess with him, So it was like so many times he had called me, showing me videos and just having conversations with me like, bruh, I really don't feel safe out here, but how can I leave when I'm already signed into a lease and I've been out here for 8 years? His kids is around the corner. It's hard for him to break away from the area that he was in because he didn't want to really come back out west or east to have to travel far to deal with his kids.
Yeah, nor should he have to. I mean, you should be able to live where you live without being fearful of the cops,
Yeah, they had pretty much had a thing out for him because, like, he was basically known for talking them down, get away from me. I know my rights, and I guess the fact that he knew his rights that gave them more fear, and I guess it triggered them to have some type of animosity towards him, and it was devastating.
Yeah. I mean, which is like such a weird thing if you think about it, because technically the way it's supposed to go is there's a rules and procedures for dealing, the police have their rules they follow, and you have your rights that you follow and assert. So it's so weird that they would get frustrated when you actually assert your right. So I'm a teacher, and it's almost as if my students came to class having done the homework and having done the reading, and they were all prepared, and I got pissed at them. You know what I mean? Like, and that made me upset. Like, no, like we got a contract here. I'm your teacher. You're the students. You do your work. That's technically how it's supposed to be between police and citizens. They have their responsibility and roles, and we have ours. And so they should actually, one would think that you would be like, excellent. This citizen knows their rights. They're well informed of what it means to be a citizen.
I would consider that, but being that if you know what to do, then. You can go on about your way. You a law-abiding citizen. We should never have a problem with you. So we should overlook you. But being that I guess that so much, it's a hindrance towards their job. They're not able to violate you and take you out your square. So I think that was more of a point of that situation too.
Right. Yeah, I guess maybe it speaks to what their job really is, which isn't to protect and serve us, right?
Harass, more our stock.
Yeah, damn, and kill. Unfortunately, I mean, this is of course difficult, and you can answer it however you want or not, But I mean, I know you said it was devastating. How has your family been able to cope? And because you're here today and you're still fighting, which we salute you for that. It can't be easy. So, if you could tell me, I'd be interested to hear how you make it through.
Well, every day I wake up, no doubt I think about him. I just think about the good and the kids that he has, that every time I see him, all of them looks exactly like him. All of them talks about him, and I think that builds a stronger character for me to keep on going and to exist for them. My family, the way they're coping with it, it's kind of hard. My mom, being that she had 2 of her boys died August 19th, then the other one died by the police September 19th. I think it's more harder on her because the fact that she, gave birth to them and raised them. Being that that's my brothers, yeah, we have much pain, but I think it's kind of different for her, to deal with it. I'm glad that she's coping good, because I think that any other person probably would have lost it, did something that they had no business doing, or just, crashing out in some type of form or fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to keep my head up. I watch my brothers. You know, we probably cry about it here and there, but at the same time, we feel like we got to do something about this situation and fight. You know, you want to use the wrong ways, but you'll never get no good results out of it. So I'm glad that I found a place like you guys to express myself and for my family to have a little light throughout this darkness to be able to express ourselves, to make our situation better, and to just to keep growing and to know that there's people out here that's willing to let these people know that these people are not right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we started Naptown Radio, is because like no other media outlet is giving people like you a platform to speak, and you need to be heard. You deserve to be heard. You know, your word is, we take you at your word, you know, it's the truth, and our listeners do too. And, you know, like you're talking about your mother, who is, you know, exceptional. I mean, a very, you know, when she showed up to the demonstration for, you know, Adam Sykes, it was, and gave a speech right at the rally, you know, that's a heroic act, you know, to go up and, you know, just the first thing. And so it inspires us also to be sitting around with you all, and, you know, the grief, but to see how you're getting through together, and how, you know, like when we were just in the meeting talking, you know, it was your mother who said, I'm not that hopeful for my case, but if, you know,
Someone gets
if Jada
justice,
wins her
right.
case, if Jada Traynor wins her case, that'll be a victory for me. And so, like you said, it's just, we got to keep fighting, because we can't have any more Eric Taylors. It's been way too many already.
That's exactly right. And it's sad that we're in a time that's, the police are the gangs. You know, it's not the gangs on the street. It's the police that you have to be more afraid of them violating you, and you go to work and your tax-paying money comes out, and then you don't know if the same people that you're paying, you know, for them to survive will take your life. That's a sad situation. It's I have no words for it, because it happened it happened a few times. Michael Taylor's my cousin, so it's like we might be a targeted family for some reason. You know, my uncles, I appreciate, I honor them, their mother and their father, for what they had to go through, because now my mother's going through it. So with that being said, I'm just happy that we're Taylor strong for right now. You know, and keeping our heads up, and we've been through this before. So it's time to keep fighting. Yeah, you'll get through it, and we'll get through it. And, you know, the thing about history is when you look back at it, it seems like obviously that was going to change. That situation was so horrible, right? If you think about, like, you know, chattel slavery in the United States, right? It's like, yeah, of course there was going to be, you know, that couldn't last forever. Look how barbaric and inhumane that is. But when we look to the future, we should think the same way, like, you know, because someday we'll be looking at this moment from the past. And, you know, I think, you know, maybe in 2030, we'll look at 2025 and be like, well, of course there was going to be some big movement that would come and sweep the nation and change the situation, because it's so barbaric, it's so inhumane, you know? And so that keeping that perspective and that hope, because the reality is, like, all systems come to an end and new ones can be created in their wake. And so, and it's the people, like, it's not the politicians with the people with the fancy degrees who make that happen. It's everyday people like you and me, you know, everyday people like the folks at the Liberation Center, people putting in work right here in the studio with us, you know, right. So we can raise funds for you know, for the defense fund for Eric Taylor. And so, yeah, just thank you for coming on. It means a lot to us, and thanks for talking to me. I appreciate you asking me to be here.
Yeah. And for, you know, our listeners, you can definitely learn more about Eric Taylor and how to get involved in the struggle at pslindianapolis.org. And you can also get some supplies, some merchandise to support the struggle, buttons and T-shirts at indieliberationcenter.org/store. And we'll be right back.
This is Akeem with the Indianapolis Liberation Center. Located at 18th and Meridian Street, the Indianapolis Liberation Center envisions a world free from exploitation, imperialism, and white supremacy. We reject the divisive, dehumanizing systems of oppression and instead strive for a society rooted in mutual respect, care, cooperation, and justice. Through the joy of collective struggle, liberation is not just a dream, it is a necessity, and it is within our reach. We are not here to reform a dying system, we exist to abolish it and build something beautiful in its place.
All right, y'all. I hope y'all appreciated that segment from Robert Taylor. Thank you, Derek, so much for doing that. I always appreciate listening and hearing from the families of those who are not with us anymore, especially when these people have been so demonized, not just Eric, but, the anniversary of Baby G's death is coming up here in a couple weeks, August 3rd. It'll be 2 years. And I remember being able to talk to his sister and his mom and just learning more about who Gary was. It's so nice being able to actually hear from their family because you get an actual depiction of who they are and not just like this demonization, but, the good things about them and the bad things, right? Because we are humans and we are multifaceted. We are not just one-dimensional. So before we leave y'all, we are going to get into the Circle City shout out. So this week's Circle City shout out goes out to Maranda Williams. So Maranda is the Indiana State Organizer for Reform Alliance. So for listeners who do not know what Reform is, Reform Alliance is an organization and a coalition that aims to transform probation and parole by changing laws, systems, and culture to create real pathways to work and well-being. Their mission states that they are working for a justice system that promotes accountability and supports people in rebuilding through work and well-being, helps strengthen families, and create safer communities. Instead of trapping people in a revolving door between supervision and prison, a cycle that costs taxpayers billions, they're working to move them from the justice system into stability. Right. Reform's story actually starts with the unjust re-imprisonment of recording artist Meek Mill, which every time I think about that, I'm like, that's actually so cool that that's how it started. So the egregious 2 to 4 year sentence he received for popping a willy spurred the international #FreeMeek movement. I don't know if y'all remember that, but I absolutely remember that. And so this led to release on bail and eventually his freedom, which was dope, which was amazing. But, of course, Meek Mill had the resources and public platform to fight his case. But his case shed light on millions of cases just like his, and the vast majority of people trapped in the system don't get to have their stories told, right? Not everybody is Meek Mill. So on January 23rd, 2019, a group of philanthropists and activists launched the Reform Alliance to change this. Maranda joined the Reform Alliance after spending nearly 2 decades working for IDOC, Indiana Department of Corrections. Maranda held positions in case management, focusing on appropriate case planning, reentry efforts for long-term individuals, and implementing evidence-based practices within IDOC policies. Today, she has been working on building the Indiana coalition called the Indiana Secure Communities Coalition and spreading the word about why we need changes in our supervision system. So now she's on the other side of things, thank God, because IDOC does not deserve Maranda. Maranda is for the people. So I'm so glad that she, left her job and now she's working for Reform Alliance. Her focus has been on expanding the network to include more businesses and fair chance employers, right? Because I think everyone knows somebody who has been incarcerated, or if you don't, you know of someone who's been incarcerated and how difficult it is for these individuals to get back into work, to just make a paycheck. And that is on purpose, right? That is by design so that they can go back into the system, right? She's even doubled down on her efforts to bring in more young people into the fight. I feel like Chief Bailey and Prosecutor Mears and the entire Democratic Party can take, a page out of Miranda's book. And like, she is actually working with youth and figuring out how can she be a support to them. And she's making it so that all Hoosiers know that the inhumane and unjust justice system doesn't just affect people in the system, right? It affects all of us, right? Every single one of us, not just in this state, but in this country. When Maranda isn't building up the Reform Alliance, she's also teaching at the University of Indianapolis in the school's criminal justice department, which is, again, that's who needs to be teaching the youth, is somebody who has been in the justice system, sees how flawed it is, how broken it is, and is like, hey, here's what we can do to not fix it, honestly, because, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but, reforming it. The Indy branch of the PSL is happy to inform listeners that we are also members of the Reform Alliance and have been since May of this year. So this is our announcement. Shout out to us. Shout out to Reform Alliance. They made the right decision. Maranda and the Reform Alliance has given us actually advice on Vernon. We've been able to talk to Maranda about things that are going on with Vernon, and she's been amazing talking to us like, oh, you should do this, you should do this. Talk to this person. And she knows what she's talking about. I love that. It's people like Maranda, everyday people who are making Naptown a better place. Those who see the injustices of our community and instead of remaining a part of it, decide to go out and make a change happen. So shout out to Maranda.
That's what's up. Thank you, Maranda. That's it for this episode of Naptown People's Radio. And this week, you can meet Maranda Williams along with PSL Indianapolis comrades. Come through the Indianapolis Liberation Center on July 22nd at 6 p.m. for our first listening session in collaboration with Reform Alliance. If you found today's discussion useful, please pass it on, leave a comment, and listen for our next episode to drop. Support us at support.pslindianapolis.org and by shopping at indyliberationcenter.org, your one-stop shop for organizers and activists. If you have a suggestion for the show, you can email us at producer@naptownpeoplesradio.com. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with your comrades, build with your community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my co-host,
Danny Abdullah.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We trying to create a movement. We got a chance to do something in Indiana that brothers like myself been talking about for the last 40 years. When I first became political and we was organized behind the walls in the 80s and 90s, some of the stuff that we doing now with the different programs and the different institutions that we have and things like the Indy Center is things that we used to talk about and dream about doing. And now we doing them. See what I'm saying? We doing it. And we got to keep that momentum going. And it's also generation. So as the next generation come up, you know what I'm saying, it's on y'all to take it to the next level and take it to the next stage.
Salute, Shakur.